My name is Mark Williams. I'm head of group at the University of Warwick, who's helping to host this session. So welcome to session 3 of the 3D visualization in cultural heritage. We've got a number of very exciting talks this afternoon, detailing how companies are working closely in the field of our cultural heritage. Before we start, just one basic point of housekeeping. We'd like to really keep the talks on time. We're going to be finishing promptly. You will see me 2 minutes before the end flash my camera on and off, just to forewarn the speaker that we're 2 minutes before the end of the talk. And without further ado, our first speaker and keynote this afternoon is Thomas Flynn from Sketchfab. Sketchfab is the largest and most active community technology platform for displaying and disseminating 3D data online. With thousands of museums, libraries, archives, educational and scientific projects using Sketchfab to share their 3D data, the platform holds a unique overview of online and digital activity within these industries. In his role as Cultural Heritage Lead, Thomas supports cultural organisations of all sizes in developing and delivering 3D digitisation, display and outreach programmes. In this keynote, Thomas will share insights gleaned from working in a cultural heritage related activities on the platform. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Thomas now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Can you hear me okay? I'm always worried I'm talking too softly.
Absolutely, I can hear you perfectly fine.
Lovely job. And my slides are showing. Have I shared my screen properly? I hope.
I can't see your slides at the moment.
No, I can't see, not at the moment.
Then I've done it wrong.
I think you turned it back off again, and you need to pop your camera on.
There we go.
There we go.
Is that better?
That's perfect. Take it away.
Great stuff. Thanks for your help. Well, thanks for that introduction, Mark. And thanks to Paul Wilson for asking me along, and to Jack Matthews and the teams from Natural History Museum and the University of Warwick for organising and sponsoring this event. So yes, I'm Cultural Heritage Lead at Sketchfab, and I'm also co-chair of the AAAF 3D community group. And I welcome anyone to contact me about any of the topics that I'm going to talk about. You can find a copy of this presentation with speaker notes at bit.ly/sketchfab3dviz. I want to start with kind of a broad look of what 3D kind of is across industries, and this idea that 3D models of all kinds can support many different use cases and in many different industries, much the same way that 2D images can as well. So when we talk about 3D, it's a very broad range of possibilities. And within the context of the last year, within the kind of tech industry, we've seen some very big investments from very large corporations in this space, whether that's a LiDAR scanner that you can fit in your pocket with enhanced augmented reality features, or a standalone VR headset that people find easy to recommend that you try out VR with. We're seeing some very interesting movements in the kind of the destinations for 3D content, how you can view them. So Sketchfab is a very simple concept, but it does a lot of complicated things. For anyone who's not familiar with it, the idea of Sketchfab is that you have some 3D data and you want to show it to somebody online. And so that's where Sketchfab comes in. You upload your 3D file, and then Sketchfab does some magic in the background, and then you have your 3D data on the web, embeddable like any other media, an image, a video, that kind of thing. We get a lot of the traffic to Sketchfab comes from embeds. So here's an embed illustrating an article on geophysics in Wired, on wired.com. And we see a lot of the most viewed 3D comes from embeds that are illustrating a certain topic, whether that's a news article or if it's within a museum itself or an educational context. Sketchfab is a huge community. We just passed 4 million members this year, and the categories of user, you might call them, range from 3D artists to museums to scientists to brands, and everyone in between. So this large range of people are uploading 3D and publishing 3D. So that's where I'm going to be drawing a lot of what I'm going to talk about today. One thing that's fallen out, I think, of a lot of the work that Sketchfab's done with clients and that I've done with museums and GLAM organizations has indicated that publishing 3D is a fairly collaborative process, especially for an organization. So maybe not so much for an individual artist, but if you work in an organization, then it's really the act of publishing. I'm not talking about digitization. The act of publishing is a collaborative process. And this is just kind of a very simple comparison across two different industries. Within a museum, the digitization workflow involves certain people and certain departments. Similarly, in a company developing a product that they're sending to retail, there's a similar flow, completely different use case, completely different actors within this kind of scenario. And I've very much oversimplified it. But there is a comparison, I think, between how 3D is published via a team of people as opposed to an individual. And that prompted Sketchfab to develop Sketchfab for Teams. So this is a private repository of 3D that gives teams and sub-teams the ability to kind of review and iterate on 3D all in one place. It was called by TechCrunch the Google Drive for 3D. And that's what this particular feature of Sketchfab is trying to facilitate. You can obviously set different levels of access across projects and across 3D. And then when you're ready to hit publish and show it to people, you can publish it online. So back to this idea, your 3D goes to Sketchfab. Maybe there's a loop where your teammates are helping you iterate on that 3D before you publish it and make your audience very happy. Again, going back to the earlier slide, 3D is a medium that underpins the possibilities for a lot of mixed reality experiences. So mixed reality covers virtual reality and augmented reality and some bits in between. And it could be that your use case is very simple. You have a product and you want people to be able to see it in their environment. You know, how big is this? How do I feel about this object in my space? Does it fit in with like my decor, that kind of thing? And this is a steam iron, obviously. But I think that idea of wanting your 3D content to do more than one thing is fairly common. So the Oxford University Museum of Natural History, has 3D models available online that you can view on your phone or your desktop. They're also set up for viewing in virtual reality thanks to WebVR, and this is through the Sketchfab app. You can look at the models in augmented reality as well. So these different ways of seeing things can afford different understandings of a 3D model. And Sketchfab is pushing that even further with the ability to auto-convert 3D files that you upload to the platform into two file formats, USDZ, which was developed by Pixar and Apple, that serves augmented reality on iOS devices, and then the GLTF file format, which serves AR on Android devices. So native augmented reality powered by your smartphone is kind of becoming more of a common ask, I think, from all types of clients at Sketchfab, but also the devices that are capable of displaying augmented reality in its native format, these two files, is increasing as well. So what that ends up being is when you have a 3D model on Sketchfab, the controls that are available, things that are available to you are kind of quite clear. We've added some of these buttons over the years, but being able to kind of look at it on screen, but then decide, okay, I want to see this in a different way as well. So there we have it again, mixed reality being another avenue to your audience. This diagram is going to get quite complicated, but that's kind of the idea. But also, I want to sort of drive home that it's a very simple platform to use, and that's what I think what makes Sketchfab so popular. Another theme that I'm seeing, this is more specific to cultural organizations is the idea of open access. And open access is about giving away data for reuse. And this is something that I've covered along with my colleagues Neil Stimler and Michael Weinberg from the Engelbert Center for Digital Innovation and Law Policy at NYU. And it covers 3D open access and copyright as an introduction for cultural organizations. So I can recommend that as a good intro. Sketchfab serves open access by allowing you to download models. If you decide to make your 3D model downloadable on Sketchfab, it will be made available under a Creative Commons license. There's a nice copy-paste attribution text that we've just added recently, and those files are available for download, the original, the GLTF, and the USDZ. So making that available lets other people do things with your data. If you want to really give your data away with no strings attached, we launched a public domain cultural heritage initiative earlier this year as well. So anybody can download a 3D model, reuse it in any way that they want, no caveats, all for free. And things, and 3D models, rather, they pop up in all kinds of places. This is one of my favorites. This is a video for a music artist called Post Malone. It's been seen or watched on YouTube some 300 million times. And I'm not sure if you can see it because I might be obscuring it with my webcam, but in the bottom right, I'll duplicate it at the top. There's a shield on the ground. This is in the video for probably 3 seconds, but it was noticed by the photographer who created the 3D model that it's a version of a 3D model that was published on Sketchfab some time ago. And this idea of you don't know where your 3D models may end up, I think is very powerful. And in my experience, it's always positive. I have not, in my experience, seen a bad use of 3D content or a nefarious use of 3D content, which is an argument sometimes made against open access, that people do things that aren't as cool as this. So open access is another way for people to engage with your 3D data. Another layer of interactivity is possible using application programming interfaces. So when you put something online, and this is true of many different services, there are ways to manipulate it with code to create something bigger or more complicated or specifically interactive in a certain way. And Sketchfab offers APIs to do this kind of thing. So it might be something as simple as a chair. Here's Elite Home Theatre Systems configurator, we call them, where you can design your very own home theatre seat. But similarly, the same technology can be used to create other experiences. And this is some CT data, segmented CT data from a scan of a guinea pig frog. I think I've got that right, from the Florida Museum of Natural History. And being able to kind of strip away the skin, the flesh, to look inside and see how this frog is set up is another benefit of using an API to add another layer of interactivity. APIs are also available for, again, it's true of lots of services, connecting the plumbing, so to speak, of your media to other services. So the integration that Sketchfab's built with all of these companies and more means that you can import 3D directly into their software, and your 3D models available under Creative Commons licenses or CC0 could become an augmented reality filter on Instagram, or they might serve as a VR meetup room in Mozilla Hubs, and plenty of other things as well. We have this idea of APIs as another way for audiences to access and view your content, and third parties to do the same, specific to whatever platform that they're associated with. I've got a couple more things that I'll go through. I don't know if I've gone too fast or too slow, but hopefully this is all useful info. But one thing that I found in my role is during the COVID-19 pandemic, we've had seen different ways that people and organizations are reacting to the availability of 3D or publishing 3D on Sketchfab. This is a nice quote that I saw the other day from Gilbert Price, a paleontologist at the University of Queensland. The idea that 3D assets are now a very useful way to engage specific classes with their content while they can't achieve, or rather they can't take part in on-site classes. I think it's a really great use case for 3D, and I've seen this across a few different educational settings. I think engaging students at home with your content, maybe now one reason is that 3D is you know, a more engaging medium in some ways than 2D imagery, especially if you're allowing people to interact with it live as opposed to sending a pre-rendered video. This is a quick trailer that I'd made for the next Near Life exhibition at the State Museum Berlin. And this is an entire exhibition that was digitized fairly recently and made available as the whole gallery space, as well as individual 3D scans separately, all with voiceover in German and in English, and more information on the subject. You saw some annotations there. And this is part of the museum's closed but open online campaign, making some form of virtual visit possible. Lastly, this is something that I think is not specific to any particular industry, but something that I see tripping people up fairly often is preparing data for the web, specifically for real-time interactions on the web. And what this really means is turning a very complicated object or a very heavy data set. It really needs to be optimized as much as possible for a number of reasons. Simply put, it's a better user experience, it's a faster download, and will perform better on less powerful and older devices. It's more inclusive based on that. Optimized data is more easily viewable by more people with slower, lower bandwidth connections, or those using that other hardware. I think depending on your audience that you're targeting or aiming your content at, maybe you're aware that they have very high power data, but when it comes to publishing for general consumption, public consumption, I think optimization is a very important, well, it's an essential step in preparing 3D data. Another great thing, if you optimize your data, that makes it ready for VR and AR. Both VR and AR are computationally expensive activities, so the less work that a device has to do to display a 3D model, the better. And again, the experience will be better, but again, reusing that data could also be facilitated through simplification. And finally, I think very simply, optimizing data requires less energy to store and display. So there's the added bonus that you're using up less of the world's resources. So I tried to cover a broad range of things and compare kind of wider industries outside of the cultural sector here, and I hope that's provoked some questions on the way. But that's it from me now.
Okay, thanks very much, Thomas. I find it really interesting. And just noticed on the feed, there's a number of questions coming through. I don't know if you can see the chat, Thomas. We can start off.
Okay.
I think, yeah.
Are they at the top?
Yeah, there's first thing. Paul Wilson asked the first one. In that vein, have you deal with any piracy issues or security issues with your platform? I suppose with the value of some of this data, it's a very important aspect of being able to share access.
Yes, I mean, to be honest, there will always be people, no matter what you're publishing online, that will take the data that you publish and try and reuse it. I assume this is talking about 3D models that are not made for download, as opposed to ones that you've said people can take and reuse. act of sending a 3D model to somebody's browser does facilitate sending that data. So there are ways that you could dig around and extract data and reuse it, but that data is essentially unusable for any commercial purposes. We deal a lot with looking at it the other way. When we receive something called a DMCA takedown, which is a request to remove content that somebody has posted on your platform without permission of the original author. That's the process by which we respect creators' content, and that's what we do the other way around. Is to encourage that way of dealing with things. It's more a strategy. It's impossible to police everyone across the world all the time, but that's hopefully an idea of how we deal with it.
Okay, just noting there's lots and lots of questions coming through. Just a note, if we don't get time this afternoon to run through them, I'm sure we can either Thomas, you can respond individually off when other people are giving their talks, or we can follow up afterwards. So sure. Next question from Ben Sullivan is to measure impact and justify investment. Are you able to track the usage of these model access from third parties?
Yes, so in different ways. Sketchfab uses Google Analytics and its own data logs to track analytics for specific clients, but additionally the integrations, if this is referring to the data that is supplied via API to third-party apps, we can see where, which are the biggest users. For example, I don't know the exact numbers, but I know just from previously looking that Spark AR, the creation platform for Instagram filters, is one of the highest destinations for the API integration for downloadable content, as is Mozilla Hubs and Blender. Blender is a 3D editing software, and there's an integration where you can pop up a menu while you're creating whatever scene you're working on and search for Creative Commons content on Sketchfab, and they're all tracked internally.
Okay. Next question. Have we got time for probably one or two more before we move on? Carolyn Erlin, who also says hello from Scotland, by the way,
Hey,
was wondering if the access to the API is available to all or only premium members.
No, it's available to anyone to use. There is pretty extensive documentation and examples. There are per subscription level on Sketchfab, there are some things that you will only have available if you're a paying customer. For example, one of those things is to white label the viewer, which is to remove all of the controls on the viewer. But the API itself and pretty much all of the core features are available to anyone for free using Sketchfab.
Okay. Next question from Imran Rahman. Do you have any thoughts on the feasibility of hosting raw data, i.e. from CT scans alongside the 3D models on Sketchfab?
This is a question that does come up a lot. The idea of so when you publish, for example, a 3D model on Sketchfab, probably there are other files associated with that project files. If it's made with photogrammetry, there's image files, similarly with CT data. And Sketchfab is really laser focused on this idea of publishing 3D models, the kind of the end result. Currently, the way that we, or the work that I do with museums and galleries, is to push the idea that Sketchfab is not your data repository. It's not your kind of tape backed up data storage center. It's the place that you want to show people this data. You want them to interact with it, and that's what's.
I mean, some of these data sets from CT are huge, aren't they? I mean, it'd be very difficult to post up the raw data sets. But
definitely, but I encourage people to add links to data hosted on other sites. For example, like Morphosource is another platform that is designed for hosting that extended data, whereas the interactive 3D that they offer is of a different quality to Sketchfab. Another way to look at this question would be, well, could a Sketchfab viewer of the future load CT data sets and display them, so volumetric data, And it's not on the roadmap right now, as far as I know, but it's very possible with the next iterations.
Okay. I think there are a few other questions, but I think we're starting to, in the interest of time, run out of time. So thanks very much. I really appreciate that. That was a really interesting talk. Thank you, Thomas. Okay. So on to the next session, which is from Stephen Day. I'd formally like to introduce him, who's the founder of Oxford-based ThinkC3D. And ThinkC3D specialises in creating replica object cultural heritage applications using a mixture of digital scanning, 3D printing, and more traditional modelling methods. Stephen's talk will talk to us today about the wealth of applications he has undertaken, working on over 200 projects in the sector, and will share his experiences with us this afternoon in 3D visualizations for the creation of authentic replicas. Okay, Stephen, so without ado, I'd like to hand over to you if you want to share your. I can see that.
Hello, can you hear me first?
Yeah, I can hear you. So I'll flash. The last talk finished on time, but I'll flash my camera on and off if we start to run out of time. So, please go ahead. Thank you.
Well, firstly, hello everyone. It's really nice to.
Stephen, sorry to interrupt. Do you want to turn your camera on by clicking the left
sorry,
hand
I've done that
button?
already. There we go. There we are.
There we go.
Yes. Firstly, I'd like to say it's really nice to connect to the wider sort of digital 3D heritage community, and it's obviously been an interesting year, and I've really missed going to see people at museums. So this is really nice to at least talk to you all, even if it's through the chat room. What I'm going to talk about today is just it's going to be a fly through because I've only got 15 minutes to do this, and I've put way too many slides. But I just want to give you a feel about the sort of richness of what's going on in digital heritage, and also what trends I've seen, obviously partly because of this year and what's been going on, but just interesting trends anyway that I think that make this an even more exciting field in the future, I think. So I'm going to crack on very quickly. So ThinkC3D is just a studio workshop based just outside Oxford, where we actually provide all kinds of services in the 3D sector to academics, to museums, to healthcare educational people, artists, scientists, educators, and all kinds of people in between. So we like to see ourselves as not just people that 3D print stuff or create digital models. We actually try to innovate. We actually try to research. We actually try to push the whole discipline forward as well. And we provide a lot of content for papers, applied, sometimes theoretical. And we've even written a chapter of a book, or I did, towards sort of educating the wider world about 3D. The purpose of ThinkC3D is it's kind of a personal project. I've been a kind of artistic technologist, scientist person who's sat in between all these things for many years. So I wanted to start a project which was kind of hitting all my interests. And I've always loved museums. I've spent many years going to museums. So I started ThinkC3D really to out of personal interest. And what I want to say is ThinkC3D is not big industry. It's like a lot of 3D practitioners. We're a small team of people in a studio, and so we're called industry, but actually we're a bunch of enthusiasts as well, just like all the museum folks out there and researchers. And our inspiration is the same stuff. It's just that we have to work out in the private sector, where we're always desperate for money, but we managed to get involved in lots and lots of projects, so we're fine. So what I want to say on that slide is that we've done over 200 projects in 3 years, and that is not an exaggeration. And what I want to say, one other thing, is that those projects have probably been 50-50 natural heritage, if you like, and cultural heritage. So the technology and the techniques apply as equally to different sectors, and I'll cover some of that very quickly. But these are just a snapshot of some of the of some of the stuff we've done. Yeah, our Patreon won't go over this in any detail. It's a really long list, but I'm absolutely pinch myself when I look at this list. We've worked for some of the greatest museums in the world, and for some of the smallest museums in the world, and for quite an amazing collection of universities, and also very much global now, in fact, and working in Europe and in America. So it's been an amazing few years. I heard this question on Twitter the other day. Somebody said, why 3D? What's the point of it? And I think this is a really interesting question. And it's kind of sometimes the simple questions are the interesting ones. So, I mean, I see this as a kind of a new, almost like a new art form, a kind of new, a new way of looking at the world, if you like. And there's nothing new in looking at the world and trying to capture it and represent it. This is something we've been doing since this Neolithic art over here. So, you know, this is just the latest development in that. And, you know, I think the richness of what you can do with this thing is something that's very exciting, and something that will allow us to explore whole new realms and experience new things. So I think, you know, I'm a very positive person when it comes to 3D, as you might imagine. So this is something I'm very excited about. And what's really exciting about it is it's really, really useful for scientists, but it's also really useful for artists and educators. It's useful for so many different types of people, and the same methods and same techniques can be used over again. I think it's important to say, though, that the 3D, you know, doing 3D, it's a creative process. Even if you're using it scientifically, you have to think about all the possible options and all the possible combinations of things you could do to actually produce an output. So I think there's something really interesting in this, that it is a creative process in itself, producing this 3D, you know, and it's very important to think there's still some miscomprehensions out there that computers do all the work. They do not do all the work. It's very much a matter of making lots of different choices and using different techniques to arrive at different kinds of results. So 3D creators are very much responsible for the outputs. And 3D production, of course, has its limits, both digital and physical production. Printers are not perfect. Screens are not perfect. There's no VR headset yet which creates actual reality, but a believable reality that's completely believable. But everything is getting better and it's getting more interesting. But it has limits. And I think the 3D outputs, you know, in themselves, I think this is one for sort of museum curators. You should start thinking about the things that are getting produced, actually probably museum pieces of the future. And there's an interesting question around that. Applications of 3D, these are all real applications. I think application is really important. It's really important that we don't just do 3D for the sake of it. Well, we guys can, because we all love 3D, but we actually do 3D for some reasons. And we do it to solve particular problems or to communicate particular ideas. And I think these are just some of the possible uses of it. And obviously we're very much known for doing physical replicas to realistic, and our ambition has always been to push this to its limits and see what can we actually do using digital techniques. So we're not kind of fond of just printing little pieces of plastic. We actually try to make things that are realistic, and in that process we've actually got involved in using traditional techniques as well, like bronze casting, as well as using digital. But I should say that, you know, probably about 60% of our work is actually digital, because every single thing we create starts with a digital file. So yeah, this is a really interesting point, that so we're digital artists as well as physical artists, and sometimes the output is digital. So the other uses are here, like conservation. We do a lot of work conserving natural history specimens, or restoring them by or keeping a record of a particular specimen, helping to restore them when there's missing bones, actually restoring historical natural history specimens. So is another thing we do a lot of with a guy called Nigel Larkin. So we've done all kinds of whales and dinosaurs and marine reptiles and so on. Comparative studies is a really interesting one, using the technology to actually gather objects from lots of different museums and bring them together. Another point is measurement is much easier once you have a 3D model in a computer. There's another interesting one is repatriations. We haven't done any big grand national repatriations, but we've repatriated objects digitally, if you like, or other facsimiles that we've created for communities who wanted some copy of an object that might have been found near them. So we've done a few of those. I've got another slide on that. And digital engagement. This is one that's been occupying me quite a lot recently. I was very interested to see Dan's digital gallery. We've actually been working on some digital worlds ourselves, which is really an interesting area. And we've also been working on creating objects that are essentially retail objects for museums to help them fund themselves and to help funders as well. You know, the idea that we actually utilize the 3D content within the museum to help in the problem of funding is a thing we've been doing for a few years now. So that's another interesting area. So application is key. This is an example of, I can't really describe this in any detail and within the time I've got, but this is these are objects that have actually been repatriated to their communities by proxy, if you like. Some really interesting Ukwo bronzes to Nigeria, and this bell, St. Connor's bell, which was actually a digital model first created by the previous speaker, Tom, and then we physically created it there. The techniques, again, not much time to do, but the techniques that we use are CT, so we know how to process segmentation into digital models that can be used online or to create physical models. We do digital sculpture, which is where we actually start sometimes from scratch if we're allowed to, or from drawings or from photographs. We can actually create objects in 3D. And that's because we have a number of artists, 3D artists that work with us. And then photogrammetry, which accounts for probably sort of 2/3 of the 3D generation, if you like, that we have, which we've become very expert at. We've been doing this for about 6 years, 7 years now, and we've really pushed it to its limits. So there's a lot of really interesting experiences with that. Our physical production work takes 2 tracks, if you like. Sometimes we 3D print something which is so good that it can actually become the end object, often with a bit of surface treatment or painting or polishing at the end. Or we 3D print something, and like one of the talks yesterday, we can create molds, and then we'll cast off that object, and then we'll finish the surface, the patinas, and whatever we need to do. So we have 2 ways of creating things. The latter case is often used for any kind of retail type object because the cost of the upper arrow is a lot more than the second per object, if you like, although there's more cost in the development. This object here is a bronze and Tinus statue that we created. So this went through 2 hole molding processes. So we 3D printed it, we molded it, we cast it in wax, which is the classic lost wax method, which then went off to for investment casting into bronze, and then was surface treated. Okay, I'm just getting the next one. And here are just 2 examples. I just want to flash these on the screen just so you can see of the extremes that we've been going to create really nice, believable replica objects. This one took about a year to develop, actually. And this is the Bath-Yurt's flagons, which we did for the British Museum, for a museum in France. And these replicas are 3D printed, but then we've surface treated this with actual bronze to make it look this collection, which is an amazing museum in London. And this statue was this is real marble, this is real bronze, starting to take off. We're doing more and more of this stuff. So kind of a bit like the stuff we saw yesterday about the great environments. This is something we're feeding it into sort of a kind of 3D artistic environment where we can actually recreate a whole new landscapes and so on. We're using other materials because there's a wealth of 3D models out there. So where we don't have the particular asset we need, we can tap into the huge libraries, including things like Sketchfab, which we saw earlier. We're also using environmental data. So this is a Sudanese landscape I've created, and it's actually based on topology data, so that it's actually accurate. And then using scholarship, which I've read several papers about, Tahakwe's pyramid, I've actually managed to reconstruct it based on the scholarship that I've read in the papers. So this is a little personal project I'm working on because I'm very fascinated by these Sudanese pyramids. it just shows you what you can do. And it's a very small picture, as you can't see it, so it's very small, but it gives you an idea of what can be done. And the other thing you can bring in is you can bring actual sort of digital actors or real actors into these environments. You can bring all kinds of soundscapes, and then you can output them to so many different environments. And this is another one I've done. If there's anybody from Edinburgh online, you might recognize this. This is the Meadows Park. And these are some 3D scanned whale bones that we actually 3D scanned, photogrammetry scanned and built. And then I've put it into an environment which looks a bit like a photograph to start with, but everything you see here has been created. It's an entirely artificial environment. The only thing that comes from actual reality is these whale bones, which have been 3D scanned. So I've used this as a way of showing off our work in the environment where it will eventually be. So it's really interesting. So this is an example of this digital environment, and it's an actual animated environment. The trees shake. This person here is actually walking in the environment. Yeah, so new developments is lots more R&D this year because we've been locked in our houses at times. We've been doing a lot of scanning work and a lot of digital sculpting. We've just completed the scan of a theropod. We're doing more retail objects. So we're doing some Degas statues for the Ashmolean. Some interesting things there. And we're also doing a lot more of this digital environments. Obviously, the sort of tactile exhibition pieces have kind of disappeared a little bit, unfortunately, because of what's been going on. So we've had time to actually put more effort into some of this digital stuff, and it's been absolutely fascinating. I mean, anyone who's really into the sort of technical side of it should really have a look at this UE4 and Blender, Unreal Engine. So you can do some amazing things with it. Okay. Conclusions, this is it. This is a good time to be in this sector. I think it's very exciting. The hardware and software are moving on. The hardware and software are becoming more 3D artist centric, and there's so many tools and so many libraries now that it's very small teams like ours can achieve some very big results. It's very exciting. And the real-time engines, which are originally developed for gaming, are now being used in the film industry. Are phenomenal. You know, and the VR headsets that are coming along. We've got a Valve Index, produced some fantastic results. I mean, you really do. I've actually stood next to that pyramid we saw earlier in virtual reality, and with the clouds moving and the sound of birds, and it's quite spectacular. So you should have a look at that if you haven't. I think this is a birth of a new medium, a new art form in some ways for the 21st century. It's a new way to communicate, and it's fantastic. I think also there's a lot of need for applications. I think the community, the wider community, is aware of 3D, but I think we need to show them really good applications, real quality 3D models to really get people interested in this. And lastly, I think I have to say, I think it takes a bit of commitment. I'm very keen on that we sort of develop this as a field, and that we apply the same professionalism you see in the gaming industry or the filming industry to heritage. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. That was really, really interesting. And I'd noticed questions starting to come through thick and fast. I'm not sure we'll have, we're not sure we'll have a chance to get through them all, but as I said, the same before, if there are questions that you didn't get, I'm sure you can answer from the chat.
Yes, I'll look through them. Sorry, I haven't noticed them yet, but I see they're popping up yet.
Yeah, indeed. So Paul Wilson has asked a question. Have you had any requests for making props outside of cultural heritage, i.e. movies or TV? Yes.
In fact, we made a prop for Jack Whitehall, the comedian, which went on the London Palladium, which was somebody, I don't really watch it, but it was somebody from Downton Abbey, a model of them, in a rather compromising position. They are. They actually, his cousin knocked on my door and said, "Can you do this thing in Rush? Because we need a prop." So we did that. On a more serious note, we've made some props that have been in TV documentaries. We did one about a pliosaurus, where they actually we printed teeth with the serrations and without the serrations, and then they plunged it into something called ballistic gel to show how the teeth would operate with and without those grooves that allow it to sort of reduce the suction of the teeth going into the meat, and basically. So that's all very gruesome, but yeah. So we've done a few for natural history programs, a few props that way.
Great. Danielle Petrelli was asking a very interesting question. One I was going to ask actually about 3D printing in other materials and what range of sort of technology have you got access to? Yeah, so we have in-house, we have 3 different technologies. We've got stereolithographic SLA, which is probably the most precise technology, but the material is absolutely horrible. It's acrylic, and it can be used for exhibition piece, but not for handling at all. It's too fragile. It depends on the object, but generally speaking, you can spray it and paint it, and it can look nice in a cabinet, but not handled. We've also got a powder gypsum printer, which actually prints in color, which we use, which is where we really started when it came to making replicas. Very, very good at bone. So we've done a lot of paleo stuff, a lot of natural history using that. It's quite good at doing, luckily a lot of old stuff is really dirty and rusty looking, so we can create sort of clay objects and pottery to an extent, statues certainly, but okay. Yeah, so we've got, so moving on, so quickly moving on from that, do you how do you keep up to date? Is it an in-house facility? How do you keep it up to date? Because 3D printed technology is rapidly moving and evolving. How do you? Yeah, we do everything. We don't do. We've started doing some CNC recently. We don't do that in-house, but everything else we make in-house. The technology is moving on rapidly, but we keep an eye on it. It's not moving on that rapidly. It's getting refined. There are bigger SLA printers, for example. We've got our eye on one of those, but it's yeah, I think it's important to say that 3D printing, you can't print in any material. You're limited to the material that printer supports. So that's why we started molding and casting things off 3D print, so that we have a right. Okay. I think we're just out of time. I said there are a number of questions that have come, really good questions. So just thank you so much, Stephen. That was really interesting and interesting. Some stuff behind it. Yeah. I was going to say, that's not virtual. That's real, is it? That's real. Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much, Stephen. My pleasure. Okay, over to our third talk this afternoon. Introduced to Drew Wilkins. He's one of the founders, the co-founders, and the head of educational content at Fish in a Bottle. And Fish in a Bottle is an innovative Leamington Spa based around the corner from us. So Warwick, based in Leamington Spa, a digital agency responsible for creating content for the BBC, museums across the UK, and international powerhouses like Activision and Sega. Drew will speak this afternoon on his experiences in creating digital content for museums and the outcomes that they have produced. So, without any further ado, over to you, Drew. If you want to load up your presentation.
All right. My background is virtual, not under the ocean at the moment. Hopefully, you can hear me okay. Let me just see if
your is it about you? Your mic's very fuzzy. I don't know. It's crackly. I don't know.
Hang on.
It might be an issue.
Let me try and plug it back.
That's better. No, that's better. Yeah, it stopped.
Okay.
Oh no, it's starting again. No, it's starting again. We might have a loose connection or something.
Just while Drew's sorting that out, just a reminder to keep your questions coming in as the talks are going on, and do put them in the chat.
Can't hear you, no. Don't worry. You're dead. Can you hear us? Can you hear us? I don't know what do you suggest, Jack?
Just while Drew is sorting that out, do try unplugging and plugging it in again, and if you need to, do leave the system and just log back in. Sometimes that can reset the microphone settings. A reminder that after session 3 today, we have the final session, which is a panel discussion chaired by Ellie King, where we'll be bringing all of our keynote speakers back together. We'd encourage you to join us. A reminder that you'll need to register separately for that, as with all of these sessions. I'll make sure a link goes up during the remaining talks in this session, so do make sure you're registered for that. There'll be a small break between session 3 and session 4. And yes, if you do have any questions for our speakers, do make sure They keep rolling in the chat, and that gives Mark time to collate them. Hello.
Any
Drew.
better?
Wonderful, we can hear you.
I think it doesn't like me unplugging the mic back in. Let's not do that again.
No, don't touch anything. But thanks,
Right.
Drew. So I'll ring off now. If you can, we'll carry on from there. Don't worry, we'll start from now. So please talk as Jeff said. Keep your questions coming through, and I can monitor them. Brilliant.
So hopefully,
yes, that's fine.
Okay. That's good. Right. And I'm Drew Wilkins. I'm one of the founders and owners of Fish in a Bottle, and we are. It's great because I get to kind of follow up from what Thomas and Stephen were saying. So my personal background is as a game developer a long time ago, but as Fish in a Bottle, we get to work with a really diverse range of visionary clients and get to help them realise their ambitions across a really broad range of subject matter, which always keeps life very interesting. So as mentioned, those clients include people like BBC, Museum of London, Royal Academy of Art, and Oxford University Museums. I've been running Fish in a Bottle for the last 17 years with my business partner, Justin Eames. And so prior to that, I was a games designer, kind of developing games for consoles. The videos showing at the moment are a few examples of the kind of work we produce at Fish in a Bottle. So kind of going around the screen relatively quickly, we've got the Away 360 experience that we produced along with Animal, Vegetable, Mineral for the Royal Academy of Art, Gut Wars for Oxford University Museum of Natural History, the Great Fire of London game for the Museum of London, and an interactive episode of Casualty for the BBC. We'll move on from this slide before things get too gory with that. Anyway, so kind of the session I'm going to go through today is to take you through a few examples of where we've been using 3D visualization in a way that kind of makes it more playful and allows people to get kind of a bit more hands-on with the past. So double click. The first project I'm going to talk through is the interactive experience we developed for Oxford University Museum of Natural History's first Animals exhibition. If you saw Imran's talk yesterday, you'll already be familiar with the background of this exhibition. So the exhibition took visitors back around 600 million years to the origin of animals as they developed in the world's oceans. As part of the exhibition, Mighty Fossils were commissioned to create a series of 3D models based on the fossil records and the latest understanding of how these first animals would have moved. And these models were used to create some really amazing visuals, like the one you can see on this slide. So this isn't my work, this is Mighty Fossils and their production. I certainly won't take credit for that. What we were commissioned to create was a more playful, interactive example. That doesn't work. Let me skip to the next slide. So we were commissioned to create a playful and interactive experience that took all of that 3D data, the models, the visualizations, and that animation data, and dropped it into an environment where people could get involved and experience it firsthand. So kind of drawing on what Stephen was just saying, using these models in a more interesting and playful way can really give people an interactive and engaging experience. And what we did was, within the environment, we were able to use 3 screens. So the screens that you're seeing here are 3 32-inch monitors in portrait, and these monitors were positioned so they kind of encompassed the person experiencing it, so that you gave more of a sense of immersion. You were sort of still physically in the museum and could walk up to it. They allowed you to navigate around the experience using a combination of touchscreen, so they were all touchscreen enabled. So this content that you're seeing pulling up, you could tap on to bring out, and the 8 buttons at the bottom allowed you to navigate directly to points of interest. But we also introduced a joystick mechanic that allows users to move around the environment, looking around at different angles to see what was going on. So we did toy with allowing the ability to have a free roaming experience, to move around the environment in an uncurated way, but it quickly became apparent that it was quite easy to get lost. So we didn't want a frustrating experience for visitors where they couldn't find the points of interest. So actually what happens is, if you're using the touchscreen, you can navigate directly to the point of interest, and unless you touch the joystick and take control directly, the camera will automatically follow the most interesting objects within the environment. The environment also includes a remote audio experience. So as you move around, you can hear the different things, which is great. So we took this approach to everything just to give a real good sense of immersion. And as Imran was talking about yesterday, the experience has proven to be very popular with younger visitors to the museum, and it's received quite a lot of praise from visitors that were there. So if you've already got animated 3D visualizations of this kind that you're producing or have access to anyway, producing this kind of interactive, immersive experiences is probably actually a lot easier than you think, and they can be developed relatively easy and relatively quickly. So we're a games background, and this is relatively simple stuff for us to produce. So moving on. So take a big jump forwards in time, so going from kind of 600 million years ago to just 650 AD. The next project I wanted to show is the Way of St Hild. This particular project was developed for Hartlepool Borough Council, and in this case we've used augmented reality to enhance a 48-mile stretch of coastal path. It's a pilgrimage trail that runs from Hartlepool all the way along the coast to Whitby Abbey. And for this project, we created and animated a 3D representation of St Hild herself. She's based on paintings and carvings that we've got, but obviously there are historic records for what she actually looked like, just interpretations that people that came afterwards have made of what she looked like, and we've kind of based our interpretation on that. The project uses app markers along the route, so it's AR delivered and triggered by markers. So what will happen is someone traveling along will encounter the marker, they'll have the app on their phone and can use the app to scan the marker, and this triggers an automated sequence with the character, which includes voiceover that delivers information about St Hild, her pilgrimage, and some of the history of the surrounding area as you're walking along. The app also includes GPS location tracking. We've done this in a relatively lo-fi way, partly because if you're pinging GPS an awful lot, you use up people's battery, and people don't really want to lose their battery life when they're halfway around a pilgrimage trail and 24 miles from anything. So the animated character is triggered at these other points, but context sensitive information is also triggered by the GPS as you go. So when you move into certain areas, the app will pop up information to give you a bit of an overview of what you're doing. So from an accessibility point of view, we also made it possible for the content and the character to be accessed without needing to walk 48 miles. So that's really good for anyone who can't walk along a coastal path, or more like myself, has less inclination to walk along the coastal path than sit at home and experience it. And the app launched earlier this year on International Women's Day. And obviously, global pandemics have kind of got in the way of us understanding how well this app's been received, and being able to do the support that was originally planned, which is a little bit unfortunate. So the next project again is using some augmented reality and is custom for us. So this is an augmented reality project that we created to explore Leamington Spa's Victorian association with elephants. So as part of the Art in the Park Festival here in Leamington, we produced an app that allowed festival visitors to search the parks for 3 virtual elephants that were hiding. Once they were found within the hiding spots, users were able to trigger the elephants to appear, and these animated elephants would then appear in various locations, giving people the opportunity to take pictures and selfies with the elephants. Each of the 3 elephants was textured by a different local artist to tie in with the themes of the festival, and to give each elephant a unique look. So we tried to make the app a really nice, playful experience, encouraging families to explore the festival, and the elephant in the water there, despite causing all sorts of trouble to get it to work. This is getting quite technical, but the way markerless AR works is to identify the floor plane, or where it thinks the floor plane is, and place an object relative to that floor, which is what we were doing here. But when the floor is liquid, reflecting light and moving, it becomes really awkward. So we had a few challenges to get that to work properly. But we did, and it's actually quite magical to watch the animated elephant as though it stood in the water, washing itself in the location where historically the elephants would have been in the river washing. So it was quite good fun to work on. Finally, I thought I'd run through a couple of more R&D related projects where we've been using 3D visualization to try out a few different things. And this will certainly tie into what Thomas and Stephen were saying. Not this particular project, the next one, but this one here was looking at whether we could take 3D visualization and make them feel more tactile. So this is using web technology, and the intention is that we scan a face and live position a 3D object onto that person's face, specifically looking at positioning it correctly, obfuscating parts of the model that would be obfuscated by the face so that it looked correct, and doing all of this in real time so the positioning remains correct. I say R&D project, thanks. So it had a few challenges. It's a bit difficult to do. We've used cloud computing to work things out, so it's a little bit reliant on your web connection. But we got it working quite well, and it does track objects, as you can see in these static pictures. And it was quite an interesting piece of R&D work. Finally, we've been experimenting with VR and been doing this for quite a long time now, doing various things. But in this case, we were dropping objects into VR, just picking 3D objects and giving them a try in VR, and it works exceptionally well. It does give you a really good sense of scale, as Stephen was saying, and a sense of presence, particularly when you add audio to that. And it's a great way to take something that you couldn't possibly display or experience because of its size and get a real sense of presence. So, as Thomas mentioned, it's actually pretty easy to get 3D objects into VR these days. The environments can be set up fairly quickly, and the latest VR headsets are much, much more cost effective and robust than their predecessors were. Just my own Oculus Quest 2, and it's really good. I had a really Vive and got really fed up with trying to set up the base stations and tracking and calibration. This doesn't have any of those problems, and is really quick and easy to use. But unfortunately, obviously at the moment, any kind of device use that's shared has a whole set of challenges related to it. Finally, before we go on to kind of questions and answers, I thought I'd share a few things that I've kind of covered. So I think you should consider using 3D visualizations and how you can use them beyond the thing that you're doing with them. So potentially thinking about, can we make these more playful and use them in different ways? Can we engineer them in a way that allows you to do that later? And thinking about that at the start is potentially the most cost-effective way to do that. We've demonstrated that people do really love playing with these kind of interactive 3D experiences, and it makes it really memorable and engaging. And using 3D assets in a playful and interactive way is probably not as difficult as you think it might be. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Drew. We'll probably limit the questions a bit because I think you're still having some sound issues. Occasionally, you're being interrupted by a Dalek. Sounds better. No, it's just fine. I can certainly hear what you're saying. So it's not ideal, but well done for persisting with that. We've got first question from Imran. Raman, do you think the cultural arts projects you discussed could also be delivered online through a browser, or are specialist software apps essential?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it varies. So First Animals uses the Unity engine, and it's difficult to deliver that as a web browser experience at the moment. Things are getting better in that area, but the browsers just aren't quick enough or powerful enough to do it. But if we know that we're delivering to the web beforehand, we can tailor things to be a bit more web-friendly. And quite a lot of this can be delivered web-wise, particularly the AR experiences. Sure, we were able to.
Just personally, to comment on how I really enjoyed your First Animals. Personally, enjoyed your First Animals exhibition. I thought it was fantastic. So I really enjoyed
it's really good fun.
No, yeah, definitely learn a lot. Well, just a question related to the previous speaker, actually, about how you keep museums up to date with the latest technology, because VR, these headsets are constantly getting better, faster, less. There's less nausea, less issues using them. How much do you think there is an issue of keeping museums who aren't always, lots of spare money lying around? How do you keep them up to speed with this sort of technology? And what do you think the future issues are?
So I don't think any of us have got any spare money lying around, unfortunately, at the moment. And up until the latest generation of VR headsets, I was saying very much that museums shouldn't bother, which is not with VR, which is potentially doing myself out of work. But the devices were too expensive, hard to set up, and not particularly robust. But I think the latest batch have got much better in all of those areas, and I think they'll continue to. And they're cheaper. So you kind of stop now and looking at £1,000 computer, maybe £2,000 computer, and £1,000 headset to try and run it, and you're looking at £300 for a self-contained headset. It becomes more viable.
Okay. So I think we'll probably start to leave it there. We're running out of time. We've got some questions on the chat, which is probably easier to answer. Actually, type out as you're having some minor sounds. But no, that's fine. Thanks, Drew. Really enjoyed that, and again, thanks for the First Animals exhibition. So first-hand experience with what your company's produced. So yeah, really interesting. So thank you very much. Okay, thanks, Drew. So on to our final talk this afternoon. I would like to introduce Richard Allen, who is the Executive Director of PaleoPi, an Oxford-based spin-out company specialising in the support and development of automated photogrammetry platforms. He will talk to us this afternoon about how 3D technologies can enhance audience engagement online with GLAM subjects in the wake of recent difficulties with the COVID-19 pandemic. So very topical for everybody, I think. And okay, over to you, Richard.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Great. Okay. So thanks for having me, and thanks for the introduction. I've only got 15 minutes, and this subject of emotional engagement with digital content is quite a wide ranging field of research, and there's a lot of recent research in particular on it. But I'm not going to cover that, and I'm going to be omitting the technical details of photogrammetry because a lot of you will already know a lot of it. So I'm just going to go over emotional engagement through digital means and why it's important in light of things that are happening at the moment in our society. Now, at the moment I have two jobs, one where I'm executive director of the School of Archaeology's first ever spin-out company, where I develop and sell automated rigs in order to help people to reduce the cost and complexity of the processes involved in terms of time and equipment, and also making it easier to access when it comes to skill level as well. And I have a day job currently because I haven't grown to the point where I can pay myself a proper wage yet, because all the money's been going back into R&D of my photogrammetry platform, and a second one which will be significantly cheaper and way more powerful. My second job is as a professional Python developer at the Bodleian Library, where I help to increase the discoverability of their special collections. So we've got a new website out called Digital Bodleian. It's replaced the old Digital Bodleian, so it's Digital Bodleian 2.0, and that uses IIIF technology, and I'm going to briefly discuss that later. I have a long history of being involved in the heritage sector, and almost my entire
Hello everyone, I think we're having a few technical issues at the moment. Apologies for that. Can people let me know in the chat if they can still see or hear me live from Oxford University? Mark's here. I think we've just got some issues with a connection with Richard. So while we seek to get Richard's here, but his camera has gone. Thank you, Kate, for letting us know. Just a reminder, while we're hopefully sorting this out with Richard, that the session 4 will be starting half an hour after this one ends, and we'd very much like to see you there. Chaired by Ellie King, we'll be bringing together all of our keynote speakers. Apologies for the issue. I think it must be a problem with our connection to Richard wherever he's joining us from today. I think he's just resetting his system. As a reminder, do keep your questions coming in, or maybe you're keeping them up your sleeve for Ellie King and the big panel discussion this afternoon, where there'll be lots of opportunities to unify all the themes that are being discussed. While we're waiting for Richard to rejoin us, his slides are still there and ready to go. I wonder if were there any questions, Mark, that we didn't get a chance to do earlier on?
Let me go back. That's a good point.
Or is there any?
Yeah, I've got a question for Drew from Paul Wilson. If Drew's still connected. What brought you into this is a personal question? What brought you into cultural heritage from game development?
I was just typing a political answer, but I can get less political now. It was getting too long. So Justin and I have both been working in games for quite a while, and we've been talking about setting up our own company, and kind of originally identified that our skill set could be used really well outside of the game sector. but if we're trying to make a game for ourselves, it was going to cost us both of our houses for one attempt at making a demo that had one shot of working. So we looked early on at ways that we could use our skill set in other sectors, and actually we worked with the BBC almost immediately. So we started producing smaller games for the web, for children's BBC, but also kind of more interactive and engaging stuff for other areas of the BBC. And we haven't stopped working with them since. They're 17 years. We've pretty much always got at least one BBC project on. I think we've got 2 at the moment. So yeah, so it was quite good.
Cool. Interesting. Thanks, Drew. Jack, any luck with Richard?
Still no luck on Richard. I'm obviously discussing this live. One possibility might be that we sort things out with Richard. My guess is, looking at everything, that we've all got good connections with each other. So I think it must just
be at his end. Yeah, something's
personal connection. We'll obviously have a chat with our esteemed leader, Paul Wilson, and my one suggestion would be that we just quickly slot Richard in at the start of session 4, perhaps, which is something we could technically do quite quickly. While we're waiting, in the hope that Richard will still reappear, I was going to ask Thomas, if Thomas is still there. It seems like, for obviously your Sketchfab can be applied to all sorts of areas, but it seems like you have a lot of paleontologists who are interested in Sketchfab. And I wondered what was the driver behind that? Were paleontologists an early user of Sketchfab, and that's kind of spurred its use?
Yeah, well, I think paleontologists work with material that is perfect for photogrammetry, which is one of the most accessible methods of creating 3D models. And I think they were already doing that before Sketchfab came around. And just the idea that you could then publish the 3D model online, I think is just a good fit for that particular use case, whether that's for internal audiences within your organization or for outreach is another common one, or just the idea that you're digitizing public domain content and you want to release that for other people to use as well. I think the same goes for 3D artists, making goblins and dragons and things. If you're producing 3D, Sketchfab is just an easy way to publish it, and I think that's why it's popular with so many different groups.
Excellent, thank you very much. I can see that Richard is having some issues getting back into this session. So what I'm going to... Oh, he's back.
Yeah, Richard has joined the room, so there's hope.
And we've got a bit of buffer time between session 3 and session 4. Richard, are you there? How are you?
I just got booted by my Treehouse phone connection.
Apologies. Do continue. We've got a bit of spare time between session 3 and session 4, so do finish your talk as you normally would have. Apologies for the connection issues.
I'll try and continue. Thank you. Like I was saying, humans are storytellers. We love to tell and listen to stories, and I would argue that it's a human need that we all have, and our culture is saturated with them. For most of our history as a species, we've gathered around a fire, and sometimes nothing to do but make music and tell stories to one another during the dark hours of each night. And I'd like to think that this has been the case for as long as we've had fires, and we have some evidence to suggest that this has been a very long time indeed, as far as humans are concerned. We've got evidence of using fires in a purposeful, managed way, almost up to 1.6 million years ago, if we're generous. But even if we are more conservative with the evidence with regards to having a campfire, we can go back as far as 300,000 years. And thankfully, this is not just my conjecture. We have evidence of our historical storytelling, and it's important as a vehicle of wisdom for future generations. Recently, archaeologists in Australia think they may have found evidence of the oldest known extant human oral history. And it's the story of the, forgive my pronunciation, the Gundit Jamara people of what is now known as Southwest Victoria in Australia. You wouldn't normally associate Australia with volcanoes, but researchers have used argon dating of deposits laid down during the eruption of this dormant volcano called Budj Bin. And the story tells of how an ancestral crater being transformed into a fiery volcano, and they can date this to around 37,000 years ago. But currently, more conventionally, we have the oldest written story that we have from around 2500 BC, which is called the Instructions of Shurupak. It's from ancient Babylon. And interesting, it is exactly that. It's a piece of wisdom literature of the father, the king of Shurupak, imparting lessons to his son. Again, pronunciation, Utnapishtim, a Noah-like figure who later features in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is probably a story most of you have heard of, as he saved most of mankind from the deluge. Today we have thousands of libraries filled with written stories, and more stories are told and written each day. And before 2020, we used to be able to go to the cinema and view movies. And nowadays we can watch almost any movie we can think of at the touch of a button on our phones or our computers. And then finally, some people may not agree that these are stories, but I disagree. Many of us take an active role in playing out these stories and taking an active role in being the characters in the stories when we play video games. Alongside, I once gave a well-received talk at the RLHLA on this subject, trying to convince archaeologists of why they should make video games alongside writing academic papers. And it's something that I still think needs to happen because the medium is so immersive and emotive and could potentially reach a further audience, a wider audience than somebody would be reached by reading a traditional academic paper. It's something which can be done to complement the existing research. So I'm not saying don't write papers. I'm saying work with people in the creative industry to write immersive and convincing stories from your research. However, it's perhaps because of the need and desire to consume stories that there are people who will use this medium, sometimes against our own interests. We see it when we go into virtually any supermarket or the local convenience store, or log into our preferred social media platform, the emotive headlines designed to grasp our attention and cause an emotional response. Aristotle identified three ways to convince people of an argument. One, logos, appealing to reason. One, ethos, appealing to ethics. And the other, pathos, or the hook, which is awakening emotion in someone. These modes are often used to distract us from important issues that we face as a species with potentially lasting consequences for our collective quality of life. However, they are also used in movies and stories we consume to make a lasting impact on us. We've all been there. Some of us saw the headlines around the time of Toy Story 3 of masses of grown men in the cinema crying like small children, and I'm not ashamed to claim to have been one of them. Multiple scenes in that movie. This is a painting inspired by one of my favorite science fiction stories, the Hyperion Cantos, one which I read in the Oseney Bodleian canteen, weeping over my lunch during the end scenes of book 2, when a father faced with the prospect of bringing up his daughter again says he would do it again any number of times. I have a small daughter myself. More recently, successful writing had me weeping over the Apollo mission in the Curzon Cinema in Oxford. And not only did I cry as the achievements we've made, but in particular, I empathise with Neil Armstrong over the love of his daughter Karen, who he tragically lost. And there are scenes in that movie which I can't watch. I have to skip over them. But these things have stuck in my mind because of these strong emotions that were elicited in me by the writing and by the visual effects. Have you identified my hook yet? It's usually things to do with childhood or parenting that get me emotionally. It's important that we in cultural heritage and museums use pathos along with other modes, as it's a very powerful tool and can make a lasting impact on people. I know museums that have used these techniques for a long time already, so I'm not trying to teach grandma to suck eggs, so to say. I'm saying that we can enhance the way we do things in light of recent trends by learning from other experts. Here's an excerpt from a conference that happened in York earlier this year. I would have loved to attend this if I'd have been aware earlier. I think now that thanks to COVID-19, potentially the long-term effects that we'll have on footfall in our physical collections and the impact on our finances, we should look to growing our online collections and looking at ways of using pathos to maximize the impact we can have on our visitors through distance. Here I have a couple of examples of exhibitions of monuments I remember more than others because of the emotions that they stirred in me. Here is the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, DC. It's quite plain, really, just two large granite walls that go on for several hundred meters. And it's just full of names. There are over 58,000 names written there. It's so long and the name's so small, it really puts the impact of the human impact into perspective of that conflict. And I immediately think of this whenever someone says emotional engagement. And here, some people might recognize this photo from a recent exhibition from the Maker of Middle Earth exhibition at the Bodleian. And this is something that's close to my heart because I work at the Bodleian. And I remember being brought to tears by this photo of Tolkien taking a nap with his 3-year-old son, because it's something which I was enjoying doing at the time with my daughter. And this photo and some of the personal correspondence to Tolkien had a real big impact on me. And I also think of this exhibition when people mention online engagement. I did some cursory research into what some institutions are doing recently, and the Beth Shalom Holocaust Center that I visited as a child had an impact on me. But they are developing an app which tells a story of a Jewish boy during the Nazi occupation of Germany and what he experienced in an attempt to help establish the skill of historical and what people refer to as historical empathy, which is getting people to empathize with past events and past people, and teach them to stand up for other people and support people who are different from themselves, which I think is an invaluable thing that we could we support, and more institutions with a similar goal to Shalom could undertake. I found this online collection called Emotions 3D, where one of the aims is to research how to engage people emotionally with the objects that have emotional weight and are themselves emotive as physical objects. As an example I found on their collection was one of the first footballs. Here's some of the goals of this project. They have as one of their examples, the first football. Now, this personally doesn't elicit much emotion in me, but I know that this for certain will elicit strong emotions in people very close to me. So I think having a broad range of emotive objects is something that museums should perform research into. Different people are going to react differently to different objects. Closer to my day job, this is the Digital Bodleian 2 website that we have that uses IIIF to share our manifest with other institutions. An example here of an emotive object is one of the drafts of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. This isn't 3D, but it's an example of an emotive object that people would be very interested in. Now, how do I fit in with PaleoPi? Well, like I said, I developed an automated photogrammetry platform that helps reduce the entry level for photogrammetry for people, institutions. It's multi-camera and allows people to set up a photogrammetry scan and just let it running, and it works with thousands of different makes of cameras. Now, I actively develop and support this with some help from some researchers at Liverpool have been associated with my company for a long time. This is the first object I scanned, which some people from the museum might recognize. It's a Bear Atlas. This is interesting because it's a highly decimated mesh, and I've used techniques such as normal mapping to make this web optimized so it can be viewed on a number of devices with different levels of available video capability. This is a dog skull, which I helped image for Historical Scotland. These were all foundational objects which helped with the formation of my company, and so very important to me. They didn't quite trust photogrammetry at the time, but we used Cloud Compare to compare photogrammetry with the CT scanning, and it was almost like for like in most of the surface areas. The only areas that seem to suffer with photogrammetry are places such as inside the nasal cavity or the occipital bag. And here is the reconstructed version of that skull that was reconstructed using the 3D print from the CT scan. The dogs are particularly good for emotional engagement because people love dogs. They're one of our oldest animal companions. And I used to work in a group that performed research into the domestication of dogs. That's how I got into doing photogrammetry. This is a scan of a Roman skull, which is from a burial site that a researcher at the RLHLA wanted me to scan. The skull in itself is an emotive object, but this is realms into the personal again, because you see on the forehead of the skull there's this purple dye, which is a very expensive Roman dye, and somebody has applied this repeatedly over time after the death of the individual. So this individual was important to some people in some way, that they would keep coming back and keep doing this. And here is an example of a stone tool, which was just a side effect of sampling for residues. They asked me to do some scans of their objects for them, and now they can use these for online research and engaging people with a paper that would be particularly dry to someone not interested in analytical chemistry. And these models are freely available on through the paper, or they can be viewed on Sketchfab. This one is an emotive object that I've been helping the Ashmolean and the Classics department image sets of objects that they can use during COVID, or even just online in general, to use the university's online classroom application called Cabinet. This is particularly emotive because it's a Hellenistic African slave form used to make a pouring vessel. And this is an example of some 3D, 2D work I've been helping people with. I've developed a 2D painting scanner that basically works, it moves a camera over a 2D surface, and then it will create a massive digital facsimile of something where we can get down to 30 micron details. So you can see brush strokes, individual brush strokes. Potentially could be used in emotional engagement because you can see the very moves the painter has made whilst composing a piece. And you could begin to do interesting things such as analysis of where people have done repairs on paintings and where something isn't authentic. This isn't my work, but I've been working to help this person do this. This is from a virtual exhibition of, it's an experiment to get people to emotionally engage with the Arundel collection at the Ashmolean Museum, which is a bunch of marble objects. And this is something that a colleague of mine and a friend of mine has developed. It's called Cloud Tour. It's a virtual tour which allows you to bring together maps of sites, models of sites, and then integrate models from Sketchfab or other 3D viewers into it, so that you can create a map of an archaeological site. This is the shipwreck from the, not many people know, but the Arundel collection once upon a time was shipwrecked upon a beach, and this is the map of the shipwreck from that event. And here, part of the exhibition, you can click on this assembly of 3D models made in 3ds Max, and it takes you to all the individual photogrammetry models of all the individual artifacts. And then lastly, I've been working with a company which is getting children to engage digitally with content and take ownership of content and creation of content. So I'm in an advisory role for the 3D work that is going to be going into this, where children will be able to use 3D or 2D assets that they've gathered themselves and create their own animations with them on an app. It's to encourage the next generation of children to be more producers rather than consumers. And I think it's a really good cause. And this has been led by a former architect from, I think, Cardiff University, called Professor Richard Weston. All right. I'd like to thank you. And if you would like to contact me about anything, please feel free to contact me via my website or my email address, and I'll be happy to talk to you.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks very much. Just the interest, I noticed we're quite a bit overrun now due to technical issues. That's fine. So if I just stick with the one question, and if you look on the chat, Rich, you want to go through and answer those individual questions after this or on the next session, great. So Paul Wilson asks, what challenges do you think these historically accurate archaeo games would have in being good quality and commercially viable?
Well, that's why I don't think archaeologists should necessarily do the game creation themselves. I think they should work in collaboration with game studios, because I did some research, and lots of people love archaeology, they love heritage, and they're deeply emotionally engaged with it via what is available. And it's just archaeologists make bad games. And there are really good, high-quality games that archaeologically are terrible. So I was arguing for researchers to use, they're quite recent, but there are networks available from the research councils. AHRC, for example, has a research network to connect people up from academia with industry. So what I'm saying is partner up with the studio and then tell a story. And there are some pretty engaging archaeological stories that would make really good video games, but quite often the video game studios just make a mess of the archaeology.
Thank you. Well, so being that session to close, and just so I personally have thoroughly enjoyed this afternoon's talks. Really, really interesting and good to see how a lot of companies are really engaging with the cultural heritage sector, and also how they're becoming much more embedded and more cost-effective. These solutions have become much more integrated. It's fascinating